Sometimes the smallest measure is the one that saves you. A mark you can barely see, a breath you almost don't take, a whisper that says try again. In math they call it epsilon, the piece so small it looks like nothing, and yet it changes what counts as true. There was a green pencil stub Milo kept in his pocket, 6 sides rubbed to velvet by his fingers. He'd found it at a bus stop the week his mother said they couldn't afford another test prep class. He liked the weight of it, the way it made a line that wasn't quite straight. He carved a little curve on the wood, a bent letter that looked like a fishhook, and told himself it stood for that tiny measure of courage you use when you have no more left. Hawthorne Academy sat on a hill above the river, where the bridges were older than the town. In the afternoons the windows ran gold, as if lit from inside by a stove no one could turn down. Milo had a bunk in a dorm with boys who carried spare cardigans in their backpacks and wore their names as if they came with warranties. His came on a badge that said scholarship. The math teacher, Mr. Whitcomb, kept a chalk rag folded like a handkerchief and drew proofs as if he were ironing a shirt. "You're behind already," he told Milo after the first quiz. Not unkindly, not kind either. "You'll need help, we don't have time to give." That night his roommates handed him a billfold fat with cash and told him to take the back gate down to the gas station and bring back sugar and beer. He kept the wallet under his sweatshirt and ran down the hill, sneakers slapping out a rhythm that felt like a lie he was always late to. Winter had a way of arriving in the air before it arrived in the trees, and he could see his breath when he came back up the service road. The door under the boiler room was propped with a paint can, a triangle of dirty light cut across the pavement. "Evening," a voice said, low and careful, as if he were sneaking up on a wild animal. He didn't want to spook. The night custodian stood in the door, a thin man in a gray work jacket, hair gone silver at the temples. He held a trash picker in one hand, and a paper cup of milk in the other. "Dorms are closed past 10. Milo didn't answer. He had learned how to go still when adults looked at him too hard. A few breaths passed, milk white in the cold. "I take it they sent you," the man said. "You are not the first boy who takes orders at a place that calls itself a school." Milo lifted the bag. It rustled like a small confession. He did not say their names. He did not say anything at all. In the morning, there was a note on his door to report to the dean. They called it a courtesy suspension from the dorm. 2 weeks at home to think about the rules. His mother took a late bus home from the hospital, laundry, and came through the apartment, with her palms bright as if she'd been washing stars. Milo beat her there by an hour, and scrubbed the sink until the steel gave up his face in dull pieces. He set out bowls and warmed canned soup, and didn't say anything about the dorm. She touched his cheek, proud of the uniform he put back on to walk out again. "They see you," she said, which was what she wanted from the world, the way a person wants a receipt. The night he tried to sleep on the couch in the student lounge, rain started. Slow at first, then hard enough that the gutters at the edge of the science wing frothed like dogs. He went out to the old physics lab, where the ceiling tiles had stained, and a chalk circle was left halfway across a blackboard, as if someone had tried to finish the moon and given up. He stretched out on a row of welded stools, pulled his coat over his chest, and shut his eyes. Somewhere down the hall, a floor polisher hummed, rose, fell, like a half-remembered song. "Up," the same voice said near dawn. A shuffle at the door. "You'll catch cold. Come." The custodian might have found a flight of stairs, and along a corridor that smelled of oil and lemon. In the maintenance shop, a plastic terrarium sat under a lamp, and inside it, a turtle, the color of a wet boot, watched the room like someone who'd once had a louder life. The custodian set a milk carton on the bench. Pink milk. Milo hadn't seen that since elementary school, when the cafeteria rolled it out for holidays and kids lined up to taste something that pretended strawberry. "I'm Arcady," the man said, as if asking someone to hold it for him a moment. The name and the silence after. "You can warm up here, don't make a habit of this." Milo nodded. He kept his hands in his pockets so he didn't look like he might touch anything. He stayed until the lamp over the turtle clicked off with a tinny sound, and the sky beyond the window went the color of a dollar bill. On the bench lay his math worksheet. He had left it in the lab, or he had left it everywhere he went, the way a dog leaves hair. Try the next ones on your own, Arkady said, without looking up. And Milo realized the first 6 problems were already solved in a hand that wrote like a calm river. He recognized the method, and also didn't. Everything had a reason. The reasons were not the ones he'd seen before. In class, Mr. Whitcomb asked if anyone could show another way to prove the identity on the board. Milo kept his head down. B. Raines, who wore her hair in a blunt, bored line, and played piano in the chapel on Tuesdays, glanced at Milo's paper and raised an eyebrow. The look people give a street trick. After class, she walked out beside him, and nodded at his backpack. You showing off for someone? Milo kept the bag zipped. No. Then you should, she said, a little amused. What a waste. After school, he went back to the maintenance shop and put the worksheet down on the bench. Arkady glanced at the work he had done on his own, and nodded once. A reflex corrected into plainness. Teach me, Milo said. No, please, no. The floor polisher in the hall ramped up. A soft machine thunder. Arkady stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, the way men stand when they are trying not to use them for anything that leaves a mark. I don't have money for a tutor, Milo said. I know I'm not as smart as the others. I want to know how to think. I want to stop guessing. Everyone wants to stop guessing, Arkady said. Then they guess about different things. Milo came back the next day, and the next, a persistence that felt like knocking on the door. No one would answer because they had no lead. He caught the tail end of conversations when he hid outside the staff lounge to avoid the dean in the hall. A guidance counselor joked about scholarship kids, and how much for. They should be crime said something about parents who didn't write emails. About boys who were good test takers, and not much else. The words landed like crumbs on tile. Small, sharp, hard not to notice under your shoes. That night, Arkady stood by the open door of the lab, and watched rain bead along the windowsill. I will show you some things, he said finally, as if it cost him not because it was hard, but because it was easy. One condition. A carton of strawberry milk each time. It helps me sleep, and there are rules. You tell no one. You do not ask me anything that is not a problem. And you will not talk to me about tests or grades. Yes, Milo said too quickly. You said yes before you heard the hard part, Arkady said. The hard part is that you will do the thinking. You will make mistakes. I will not tell you if the answer is right. A right answer is a small relief. A good question is a start. They begin with a triangle. Find the area, Arkady said, drawing 3 sides like a roof over the page. Milo found the base and height that looked easiest and wrote the usual half times base times height. No, Arkady said. You took the first measurement that let you stop. Draw the circle you need. Milo drew a circle around the triangle and felt the heat you feel when an adult sets a trap and you step into it with both feet. You chose a world and then made the problem fit it, Arkady said. What if you try to see the world the problem wants? Then what's the right circle? The one that lets you see, not the one that lets you be done. They worked until the rain slowed and the vending machine rattled in the hall. Arkady talked without telling stories. When Milo asked where he learned this way of seeing, Arkady tapped the turtle's terrarium lightly, as if he were waking himself. We had a teacher who did not have chalk. He drew in dust. The lesson washes away, but it sits somewhere you feel when you are alone. What's epsilon? Milo asked on a night when Arkady pinched his fingers close together over a limit proof. The gesture small enough to be a habit. A letter that means as small as you need, Arkady said. When I was a boy, they gave a prize for solving a problem fast. A green pencil, cheap, the wood too soft, the lead too hard. On the side was a little epsilon stamped into the paint. I learned that day that small things are sometimes the only ones you can carry. Milo put his green pencil on the table, the carved fish hook catching the light. Arkady didn't touch it, the way a person doesn't touch a photograph of a stranger who looks like someone they loved. A week later, Mr. Whitcomb announced that the State Euclid Challenge would replace the final exam. We have 8 weeks, he said. We aim high. Students groaned as if he had asked them to volunteer their summers for road work. After school, Milo bought 2 cartons of strawberry milk and slid one across the bench to Arkady. Bee drifted past the open door like a moth, and then came back, eyes on the milk, and on Milo's notebook, then on Arkady's hands. "This where you disappear?" she asked. "No one is here," Arkady said. "Can I?" She gestured at the stool beside Milo. "If I don't speak?" Arkady poured milk into a paper cup, less suspicious now that he had said the rules out loud. "You can sit," he said. "No questions that are not numbers." They learned in the rhythm of machines and night. Milo's work grew cleaner. Bee's piano turned to patterns she could drop on top of number strings, until they made a sound she understood. Arkady attached a pitch to each digit, one evening, in a joke that landed richer than anyone intended. And soon a melody led Bee through square roots the way a string leads you back in the dark. On Thursdays, Milo printed papers in the computer lab, dense pages of proofs and arguments Arkady had saved in text files on his phone. "It is cruel to make a man squint his life," Milo said, sliding the stack across the bench. "How did people read phones before there were phones big enough for people?" Arkady smiled into his cup. It was not his first smile. It was rare enough to feel like weather. A Saturday at the bookstore, a man in a corduroy hat stopped under the fluorescent lights that made all faces look honest and frowned in Arkady, as if a word were stuck in his teeth. "Dr. Levin?" the man said, his accent folded around the name like foil, holding heat. "From Minsk? No? You gave a talk in '97? Something about lattices. We all wanted to smoke like you." Arkady's face went still, and then looser in a way that read as anger, until you noticed the tremble in his thumb. "I am someone else now," he said. "You were mistaken." The man laughed softly. "There are not so many someones." He looked at Milo and then away, embarrassed by the shape of the assumption he had nearly made. "Good to see you anyway," he said. He meant it. Outside, the sky had gone white, a pre-snow glare that flattened the world. Milo walked a few steps behind Arkady and practiced silence the way you practice scales. In the shop later, Arkady turned the radio up for the weather report, and then turned it off. He emptied the Turtle's water dish, as if the act itself would wash something out of his head. "Did you teach at a university?" Milo asked, breaking his own rule. Arkady wiped the bench with a rag that smelled like lemons and work. "Don't pick at a stitch until you're ready to bleed," he said. The Euclid challenge approached, like a train you hear long before you see the light. Someone leaked a portion of the practice packet online, and the administration panicked. Mr. Whitcomb's jaw got tighter. The dean made a speech about honor in the chapel. In the dorms, boys compared fragments like hungry birds. In the computer lab, the camera saw Milo slip a sheaf of printed pages under his jacket. And even though the pages were proofs on convergence that would have made Mr. Whitcomb's eyes glaze. "Rumor doesn't read. Transfer," Mr. Whitcomb said. Across his desk, the blinds keening a little in the heat from the radiator, quietly. "Before this becomes something worse, I can make this go away." "It already is something worse," Milo said. "You think I stole math?" "It isn't about belief," Mr. Whitcomb said. "It's about appearances and outcomes. Be practical." Bee stopped meeting Milo's eyes, not because she believed it, but because she had a mother who came to school in a coat that was a kind of argument. "You look tired," Bee said once. A truce offered like a cough drop. "Practice," Milo said. On the night before the competition, Arkady handed Milo a stack of his problem sets, marked not with scores, but with quiet ticks where the thinking bent toward true. "Sleep," he said. "Do not rehearse the shame others offer you. You think they'll listen," Milo said. Arkady fixed his eyes on a point somewhere behind the wall. "I think shame is a contagious lie, and I think you are not sick." The Euclid was held in the auditorium that smelled like varnish, and air left in a jar too long. They spaced the students as if the gaps were part of the test. Bee sat 3 rows ahead, thumb tapping a rhythm on her knee. Halfway through, her breath went thin, her eyes bright with the wrong kind of water, and she stood and walked out in a line that did not belong to her. Milo watched her go and pinned his heart to the page. He heard later that her mother told the school they were taking a trip, a mercy disguised as propriety. That night, Arkady made soup like broth and bread. He set a real plate in front of Milo, not the paper kind. And the weight of it made Milo's eyes warm with something that wasn't hunger. "I don't see you eat," he said. "I forget," Arkady said. "About food?" about living like a person who is not a mind? He tried a smile. It cracked. There was a year I lived on cigarettes and proofs. Do not recommend. Milo reached for the radio, found a station that played something slow with strings, and the song put a little room around them. Arkady's phone buzzed on the bench. He stared at the name on the screen and let it stop. A few minutes later, the knock came. The man at the door wore a tie he didn't deserve. His hair was careful. He had the look of someone who owns a comfortable apology. Arkasha, he said, like a password. They want you to talk. They want you back. You make a statement. You come home. It'll be different this time. I am at home, Arkady said. The man spread his hands like a dealer who has dealt only bad cards for a very long time. They use your work without you. You know this. If you come, maybe, Arkady said. And there was more in the word than there had any right to be. Maybe they let me bury my son. The man flinched. He tried to look surprised and failed. You knew the rules, he said. As if Arkady had put his hand on the stove he should have recognized. We all knew them. When he left, Arkady sat down on the stool as if it had moved an inch, and his body had not learned the new place yet. He picked up the green pencil and put it down. He looked at Milo and then looked away. Is it true, Milo asked, that your work? No, Arkady said softly. We do not do this. He stood, opened a drawer, and took out a form. You should transfer if they ask you to. Do not drown for a school. It's not drowning if you walk out, Milo said. Sometimes it is, Arkady said. Sometimes the water follows. Milo signed the transfer papers that night, in his mother's kitchen, the stamp pad dry, so he pressed his thumb into the corner, like an old country. His mother slept on the couch, a hand over the blanket, the veins a map that made his throat tighten. In the morning, he handed the forms to Mr. Whitcomb, who looked relieved in the way a man looks when a load moves off a boat, and he is still dry. The award ceremony for the Euclid took place in the chapel, the afternoon sun making the stained glass bleed quietly onto the stone floor. Professor Chen from the State University gave the keynote. He told a story about solving something small when he was young, and being handed a cheap pencil by a famous mathematician, laughter moving through the room, as if it were not sadness in disguise. He held up the pencil between thumb and forefinger, the way people hold up feathers. The back door opened. A man in a gray jacket stepped in, hair like frost, and an expression like a decision already made. Arkady walked up the aisle with a turtle carrier in one hand, and a small green pencil pinched in the other. He looked wrong under the lights, and right in himself. May I speak? He said to no one in particular, which was how people who don't belong ask permission. Professor Chen squinted, then smiled the kind of smile you give a face you know from a book. Dr. Levin, he said into the microphone, old habits choosing the name, by all means. Arkady set the turtle carrier on the floor by the lectern, like an odd hymn. He took out a sheaf of papers, the proofs Milo had printed, edges curled from being read in someone's hands. He told them what they were. He told them who had carried them. He told them who had not taken anything that wasn't his. You have a good boy here, he said, voice steadying as if it had found a road it recognized. You treat him like a thief because it is easier than admitting you starve children and feed tests. He looked at Mr. Whitcomb without point or heat. You leaked your own materials to your private students, he said. It was not a question. I know the file names. They are yours. The room did the thing rooms do when the air goes from warm to cold. I didn't. He wouldn't. No, and then the whisper in the corner, he did. Mr. Whitcomb stood and sat and stood again, and walked out a door that didn't want him. Shoulders small, hand to his mouth like a man who has bitten his own tongue. I taught Milo in the old lab where the rain comes in, Arkady said. We ate soup. We drew in dust when we ran out of paper. We kept our mouths shut, because that is a trick you learn when talking gets you noticed, and being noticed gets you hurt. He looked out at the rows of boys in jackets. I left a country because they asked me to turn mathematics into chains. I came here and found chains of a different kind. You put them on thought with money and politics and fear. This boy kept his hands open anyway. He held up the green pencil. They gave me one of these a long time ago, for a small trick done fast. I kept it to remind myself that speed is not wisdom. Epsilon, they stamped on the side. A little measure, as small as you need. He slid the pencil into Milo's fist, where it waited on the end of the row. Here, you take it, you know what to do with small things. People clapped in the awkward, brave way they clap when they are not sure if they should. Bee stood in the aisle, her hair pulled back, no mother in sight, and turned toward Milo without saying anything. He looked back and felt something steady that had nothing to do with numbers. Outside, Arcady breathed as if the air were different. Jun Shen from the refugee center waited under a maple that hadn't decided if it was spring. He had a manila envelope and a look like someone who had carried a secret through security. Your papers, June said. Finally, Arcady opened the envelope. It held a new name, written away a name looks when a country agrees to speak it. There was also a printed letter with a crest on it from the Oberfeld Institute for Mathematical Studies. A place in the hills where the light takes its time. A fellowship, June said, slightly amazed. It seems the world occasionally remembers to be kind. I have eternal, Arcady said. They allow pets, June said. They allow people. By summer, the school year had shrunk to a page in people's memory, and the river ran full enough to erase most footprints. Milo took a train that headed north along the spine of mountains. He watched the reflection of his face slide over the glass like a thought he would choose when he was ready. In his backpack, 2 cartons of strawberry milk sweated through their paper like shy gifts. Oberfeld sat on a rise above a field that had been a meadow long enough to remember it. The buildings were plain and human, brick warmed by a sun that had nowhere better to be. In the common room, planks held up books that had their own dust stories to tell. On a low table, a turtle terrarium under a lamp. The turtle lifted his head when Milo came in, as if saying you again in a voice too small for most people to hear. Arcady stepped out of the kitchen with his sleeves rolled and a dish towel over his shoulder. Eyes lighter, shoulders that looked like they had learned again to belong to a body. Milo held up the milk, and Arcady laughed in a sound that made other sounds go quiet for a second. You found me, Arcady said, and the words were simple and large. Not so hard, Milo said. You left breadcrumbs. He put the green pencil on the table between them. And then, shy, put his hand over it and pushed it back. It's yours. Arcady pushed it again, gentle. I kept it to remember what I didn't want to become, he said. Keep it to remember what you're already becoming. They sat by the window with paper and coffee, and something like family. They talked about limits, and what it means to be close to a truth without claiming it. Arcady pinched his fingers together when he said Epsilon, and looked through the glass at a field going the color of bread. Milo understood that the hard part was not the questions, but the staying near them long enough to change what you were sure of. Evening put long shadows on the floorboards. A moth bunked the lamp and kept trying, wings of faint, stubborn sound. Arcady broke a bit of bread and handed half to Milo and half to the turtle, who blinked like a judge who knows what matters and what doesn't. There is a proof, Arcady said, that is really a story. You start with something too big to hold. You take away what you don't need. You keep paring until what is left is small and good. And when you look at it, it turns out to be what you were trying to show all along. Milo nodded, not because he understood everything, but because he could feel the fingerprints of understanding at the edges. He rested his hand on the table where the green pencil lay, white as a leaf. And he thought about a night in a lab where the rain came in, and a man he did not know gave him a rule that felt like a kindness disguised as work. He remembered the first time he saw the solution to something that had looked like fog, and realized it had a spine. He remembered Bia's quiet music, and the way she had started to send him voice notes again. Simple melodies he answered with numbers. He remembered his mother's hands under the kitchen light, and the way she held his face the night he told her the truth. And she said, "Of course, I knew," in a voice that let him be more than her hope. They worked until the lamp cast 2 small islands on the page. Night moved along the windows like someone walking past with their coat open. In the terrarium, the turtle tucked his head halfway as if to say not yet, not quite soon. Milo looked up. How small is small enough, he asked, not about math. Arcady lifted his fingers, thumb and forefinger barely apart. Small enough to move what needs moving, he said. That is all we can ask of ourselves. That, and to stay. The green pencil rolled a little and stopped against Milo's knuckle. He held it without closing his fist, and felt how something light could still carry weight. How a mark you can barely see could open a door you thought was part of the wall. When the branches outside knocked softly against the glass, it sounded like someone who knew the house and wanted to come in. I used to think triumph came with noise, balloons, a crowd. But some victories are too small to be seen until they've already changed you. You trade the right answer for a better question, and find yourself at a table with someone who remembers how not to be alone. You learn to measure by what stays when the room goes quiet. Epsilon. Small as you need. The world doesn't notice it. The work does. And sometimes that is enough.